How you doing, guys? Today I'm going to be doing a couple little projects on the Rugg in order to get it in a position to put the general frame back together and put it on its wheels and tires. Specifically, I got the steering system right here, and as you can see, it's pretty dirty. It's all filled with grease and stupidity. So I'm going to go ahead and disassemble that in order to take it out into basically the driveway to clean it. But I thought one thing I would show you is this. This is specifically the steering system out of the 1968 or 67, I think it is, Rugg tractor. And it's kind of interesting to see the differences between the 65, the 1965 and the 1967, 68. Because there was definitely some updates or changes. For example, you might not be able to see it, but right there, it's like the actual rod was pinched in order to create, actually you can see it better right there. You can see that the steering rod was pinched in order to create like a stop for the washers, for the front end, all that stuff. On the 67 or the 68, let me turn this around so we can see it. There's actually roll pins holding that. So holding these things in place right here. So it's kind of interesting. There's one right there too. So it's kind of interesting that change. You know, they went from this to obviously an easier, cheaper way to do it is to drill it and just put a roll pin in. Essentially, the halves that hold the shaft into place are exactly the same. The stays are a little different. This one has the stays for the hood all the way up to the actual hood, all in place. This one here only has the stays from the shaft up to the hood, nothing that goes down to the frame. So just a little differences, kind of interesting, but in general, all the parts for this steering system are in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and break it down. It's pretty simple. Actually, this part of the design is the same. There's like a half flap that's bolted to this plate. Take the 4 bolts off, this half comes out, the shaft comes out. Same thing for the lower section, 4 bolts that hold 2 halves together. So I'll go ahead and pull this apart just on the green one, not this orange one. And I will take it out there, shoot it with some simple green, and wash it all down. A little modification I'm making is this is one of the half flaps, I call it, that holds the steering shaft in place. Now, there was a hole here that appears to have been placed there for a grease fitting, but both of the pieces, so this is what it looks like on the other tractor. There's a grease fitting in that little hole. But both of the half flaps, as I call them, they have never been tapped. There's no threads in there. It's not blown out. So there's no way to put theoretically a grease fitting in there to lubricate the point here and the point there on the green tractor. So what I did was I went ahead and found an appropriate drill bit for a 1/4 tap, which we have right there. And I'm going to go ahead, I already drilled it. I'm tapping this one. I'll get the other half flap, drill it, tap it to the drill it the correct diameter, and get the tap. I got some old grease fittings. I'm going to tap it down just enough that the end of the grease fitting doesn't hit or bottom out on the steering shaft. I'll have it bottom out on the threads to the best of my abilities. All right, small modification, but I think it's really an upgrade. I would consider the install of the grease fittings was a success. Both of them are installed and snugged down. They're below the surface of where the steering rod would go, so we're good there. Same thing with that one. That one might be just a hair, but it's below. They're both straight. So I think that is definitely an upgrade. I believe I stated in one of my other videos that the left side frame rail, as you're sitting on the tractor, was kind of caved in or kind of squashed in right about this area. There's a bolt that goes through the frame right here, and somebody must have, you know, tightened it up without a spacer between the two sides of the frame rail, and it kind of crushed in. So what I did was I took my square and in a place where it's visibly not squashed. I got the measurement, and then I just kind of start working it. Oops, I start working this along. Basically, I have a bolt with a nut, and I just loosen the nut, and it obviously or puts pressure on the frame rail sides in an outward direction. Now, obviously, I've gotten this thing tightened down a little bit wider or a little bit more open than it's supposed to be, just because I know that's going to kind of retract back. So let me go ahead and get that out of the way, and we'll take a visual on how close it is. So after spreading it with the bolt and the nut and a little bit of channel lock work, just kind of prying on it here and there, as you can see, I think the frame rail is pretty darn straight. And when I take my little, square here, it is just about correct. I mean, maybe a little bit squashed right there, but not enough to worry about. All right, so let's lay out these parts for the frame and start talking about putting it back together. Frame rail's all straightened out. I'm going ahead and reassembling the basic frame. I have the two frame rails, I have the back bar, and I have the front bar. Essentially, it's held together with 4 main bolts in the front. There's one here, one there, and then obviously 2 on the other side. I didn't put the front bolt in for 2 reasons. 1, I want to square the frame, and 2, the front fender and the hood bolt to that front bolt. So I'm going to just leave that one out for right now. One of the other things is there's 4 bolts right here. These 4 right here, don't mind these holes. They hold the steering knuckle in place. The frame rail comes down, and then there's a sheet metal tab that kind of comes over, and a sheet metal tab that comes over here. And those 4 bolts go through the steering knuckle, through this front bar, and through the frame rail itself. You can see that when I go right here. You can see this tab comes all the way over to like this bump out. And I'm going to get the 4, actually I have the 8 bolts, they're right there. I just got to go get the steering knuckles. In the back, there are 4 bolts that hold the back bar to the frame rail. There's a tab. You can actually see the tab right there. So this particular bolt, the outboard ones, don't have anything else other than a pinch on the frame. The second bolt here, that actually holds the sheet metal to the seat or the fenders. So I'm going to leave this one loose for now. I did take my tape measure, and I measured the diagonals from the bolts to this hole right here. That was 38.5. I measured over to this one, to that bolt diagonally, and it was just a hair off. So I just tweaked the frame a little bit because these bolts are snug down, and it's square. So I'm going to go ahead and install or put on the steering knuckles, and we'll take a look at how that looks. The first steering spindle is cleaned and ready to go. One thing that's interesting is this one doesn't have like a cotter pin to hold the wheel in. It has this really weird like metal clip that goes on to these little slots. Now you say, well, that's probably not original, but if you see, we have original paint everywhere, as well as this has never been drilled for a cotter pin or a tension pin or anything. So really weird setup. The 1967 Rugg that I have has cotter pins. They don't have these weirdo clips. This being a 65, to the best of my dating abilities, means, in my opinion, it means that this is a pretty early machine and probably one of the first styles. The other thing too, it has these interesting little pinches here to cause the back stops for the wheels. The 67 doesn't have that. It actually has another cotter pin in this area, so probably to cheapen the process. But in any event, I'll show you how all that goes together in just a few minutes. One thing I do have is I have one of the tie rods. I do have to hook the tie rod into the steering shaft first, then we go ahead and we slip the spindle on, and then we raise the whole assembly up into the knuckle. I'll put the top shim, and then I'll put the clip into place, and that spindle will be installed. Do the same thing on the other side. There's the setup. So
Obviously, like I said, tie rod's in place. Spindle's been slid in. We have a couple shims to get it all nice and tight so there's not a lot of play. But when we look up here, you can see this weird clip. So it kind of slides in and then lays down. Now, I have it partially in. I got to take my channel locks and crimp that shut. So that way it holds in the slots and holds the spindle in place. I have the exact same thing at the end of the spindle that holds the whole hub assembly together. So kind of interesting. I've never really seen anything like this before, but I guess it works. So I got the 4 clips. I got everything in place. I got my channel locks. I'm going to go ahead and crimp this one in place and go ahead and install the other spindle the exact same way. The front end is installed. All of the clips are in place and crimped. So I'm real happy with that. I did go ahead and shim the hubs, so there's just a little bit of play and they spin really nice. There's no grease in them yet. I haven't greased any of this. I did put a little bit of oil on a couple of the things just to, so real nice. It should be real smooth. The steering is smooth. I have no grease in the knuckles or any of that stuff. I'll grease all the fittings once I get it all back together. Next up, let's tear apart this fender pan with the seat and the engine plate lift and take a look at what we got. All the parts for the seat stay, deck adjuster, and fender are all cleaned and ready to go. The seat stay, I keep saying it slow because I keep messing it up. This is like the 14th time I've had to do this section of the video. It was all bent and crashed, straightened it all out, looks great. The screw adjuster is clean and ready to go. This little piece is what attaches the adjuster to the engine and mower deck, so that's all set to go. Seat spring, pretty clean, nothing to really worry about. The fender pan is right here. I started wet sanding and buffing it. I got half of it done. It looks really good. Real happy with that. Went ahead and straightened the edge. So that's all done. Still need to straighten this edge because you can see there's a pretty good little ding in it right there. But overall, it's in great shape. There was a little bit of a crease, took the crease out. There's a high spot right here. I need to work this down a little bit, but that was from the weight of the seat spring sitting on top of the fenders and twisting it. But we'll get that all cleaned up. The only sticker or decal that's going to be missing on the tractor is this one. This is the one that said, like change the oil every 20 hours or something like that. That must have fell off years ago, and I tried to get the one off the orange tractor. It just disintegrated. So unfortunately, this is the only decal that will be missing. This is the original decal. I'm being very careful. I will be very careful around that one. We'll leave that one in place. I did take the serial tag off. It did come off quite nice, intact. So after I'm all done, I'll clean this area up real well. I'll get some contact cement and re-glue the decal back in place, as well as the mower deck adjustment decal. I took that one off. I'll re-glue that back on. And there's a couple other decals that I have that I took off, and I will glue them back in place once we get it all together. All right, guys, I think that's a wrap for this video. At the time of release of this video, I believe will be coming up on Friday, which means I'll be at the Wheel Horse Show. So Wheel Horse Show videos coming shortly to show you the festivities, but for the little Rugg, that's where we stand. All right, thank you very much for all your viewership. Like, share, and subscribe if you would, please. That helps me out a lot. I really do appreciate all your support. We'll be back on the Rugg very shortly because we still have a couple things we need to do. The engine deck and transmission deck has some cracks in it, so we're going to have to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to take that whole thing apart, weld the cracks shut, and put it all back together. That'll probably be one video all by itself because that thing's actually fairly complicated. We got to fix the hood. That's coming up pretty soon. And I have everything I need for the motor So we need to get that done also. So with that, until we meet again, thank you very much for all your support. Please leave a comment below. Please like the video also, and if you wouldn't mind subscribing, that would be cool too. And until we get back on this or another project, you have a great day.